Namaste and welcome to Live, Love, Engage. I am Gloria Grace Rand, and today I am delighted to have a guest on the program who is going to share with us a bit about her personal journey with a particular illness that she's had, but how she was able to overcome it, and because it did cause her some challenges. And her name is Kathy Smith Carter. I was going to take out the Smith, but I decided to throw it in anyway because that's what I had written down here in my notes. So there you go. She is a wife of 20 years, a daughter, a sister, and a mom to 3 Labradors. I like that. She's been an elementary school counselor for 14 years, and she uses her dogs as therapy dogs in her counseling sessions, which is cool. And she was born with a rare skin disease and experienced many challenges as a result. And as she reached middle age, she found herself struggling with depression and anxiety related to her traumatic experiences as a child. And as a result, she wound up actually writing a book about this, which we're going to talk about during this interview, in the hopes of helping others to overcome their own trauma and experience victory. So welcome, Kathy, to Live, Love, Engage.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, well, I am delighted to have you here. I'm not even sure, I don't even remember now how we connected, but, through social media, I guess, or whatever. I get to meet the most interesting people. So I love being able to meet people who have fascinating stories to share. And I did get to read some of your book, but for those who have not had the pleasure yet, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, let's start off with just maybe if you can share with our audience a bit about what actually was the skin disease or what is your skin disease that you have dealt with in your life, and how did that actually affect you growing up?
Okay, so I was born, it's a genetic mutation. Okay, in my case, nobody in my family ever that we know of has ever had it. So it's a genetic mutation, but it's very rare. It's called ichthyosis, which comes from the Latin word meaning fish. So my skin has thick scales.
Oh, wow.
All over my body. My face is not as affected, and the palms of my hands and the bottom of my feet are not as affected. But it is all over my body. I was born in a hard shell. My mother says that you could take your fingernail and tap, and that's what it sounded like. That it literally sounded like a turtle shell that you were tapping. Within a couple of days, that all peeled off. I was left raw.
Wow.
From head to toe. Just, this is gross. I'm sorry.
Wow, okay.
Raw. So for the first, I don't really know when it ended, but I know for several months I wasn't able to be held. So I wonder how that affected me. Maybe I need to do some counseling on that. But I wasn't held while I ate. I wasn't held while I slept because everything hurt me. And even today, one of the symptoms of my skin disease is that I get hurt very, very easily. So I wear loose, baggy clothes because nothing can be tight on my body. Yeah. I need to be in a Crocs commercial because Crocs are the only shoes that I can wear. I own like 30 pair of them because I can stand in them and they're not even touching my foot. Tennis shoes, boots, heels, off limits. Totally. Cannot wear them for even 15, 20 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
But although I get hurt easily, I heal about 4 times faster than you do.
Wow.
Really, really crazy. Like I was 5 or 6 and I cut the back of my leg open on Christmas Eve. And on Christmas Day, my doctor had to come to my house, lay me out on the kitchen table and take the stitches out because my skin was growing over the stitches.
Oh my goodness.
In 24 hours.
Wow.
I've actually been to the hospital and had a cut on my eye, and they said, yes, you need stitches, but the doctor's busy. just hang tight. And by the time he got there, I didn't need stitches anymore.
Wow.
So
well,
that's my superpower. I have a superpower.
I love it. You know what? One blessing, I guess. If you have to deal with that, that's one advantage. Wow.
Yes. Yes. But my skin peels all the time. Imagine dandruff on steroids all over my body. Your skin peels in microscopic pieces.
Right.
Mine peels in large, very visible pieces. I long to wear black or navy blue. I'm serious. Or dark green or red. Sure. I can't. I have to, if it doesn't have a pattern that will hide it, I can't. I'd spend the whole time, doing that. But I don't sweat. So at least like I'm supposed to. So being outside is a huge problem. I live in the South. It is hot. And so that's a struggle to live. I have a pool, which helps. And I've learned to carry squirt bottles with me and wear swim bathing suits that I can get wet and all that kind of stuff. But as a child, especially as a child, it's gotten a little bit better since then. A lot better, actually. My skin was very unnerving to look at.
Oh, sure.
Okay. Yeah. It was thick, scaly, gross. Okay. Yeah. And it smelled bad because when you have that much, when you are covered in thick, dead skin, bacteria gets up underneath those scales. Okay. Did I bathe? Of course.
Yeah.
Of course I did. Every day, sometimes twice a day. But as a little one, as I started entering school, wow. My very first memory, I don't remember kindergarten at all, but my first and only memory of first grade was the very first day a little boy in my class pitched a screaming, crying, genuinely terrified fit because he was in my class. I don't want to be around her. I don't want to be in her class, So from early on, there was a sense that my presence made other people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Genuinely uncomfortable. And, I had somebody say to me this week, I empathized with them. I don't hold any grudges toward them because, if somebody looks different, you can choose not to look at them, right? But if somebody smells different and smells bad and you're the unfortunate person who has a locker next to them or sits behind them in class, you can't do anything about that. And they were shocked that I describe it that way, but I wouldn't have wanted to be around me either. And that sounds awful, but needless to say, that caused some problems for me in the long run.
Oh, sure.
As far as how I saw myself and how, I viewed me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I can imagine that, God, kids, God bless them, but they can also be very cruel because they don't understand. And if they don't have maybe adults teaching them, how to respect differences in other people. And it's interesting when you talked about smelling different. I remember there was a girl in school who smelled funky, and a lot of people, it was like they didn't want to be around her, and me too. And and I don't know what her issue was, but it was just like, And I now looking back at it, it's like, wow, I feel bad for how I reacted because she was a nice person. I don't, and yet for whatever reason, she had this issue. So how did you finally maybe deal with this, or what was, I guess, what other, how did that make you feel dealing with all of these kids, as you were growing up and then into adulthood?
Well, okay, so first of all, home was my safe place. I have two older sisters that very much loved me and took care of me. I was looking at pictures this week of my childhood, and in all the pictures at home, I am full of life. I am happy in my own skin, bright-eyed, just loving life. But when I left home, I had to make my own way, and people ask me, my mother, the very first thing that she said to me when I told her about me telling my story, she said, "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me?" Because what were you going to do, Mom? What were you going to do? Homeschool me? She said, well, I could have done that. I'm glad that she didn't. I was never taught to use my skin as an excuse to do anything except move forward. So I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell the teachers. Honestly, the teachers were just as grossed out as the kids were. They just couldn't say it. Right. Honestly.
Yeah.
I tried to fight back, if you want to call it that. I don't stink, you know, they would say, "Oh, do you take a bath?" Yes, of course I do. So I created, not consciously because I was a little kid, but the way I dealt with it was I just pretended everybody was invisible and I was deaf. Literally. I mean, I have memories of being standing at the front of the bus, waiting to get off at my stop, and the kids on both sides of me, "Ew, you stink. Don't you ever take a bath? Your skin looks like dried Play-Doh." And I would just ignore them, look straight ahead, pretend they're invisible, get off the bus, go to my mom and put it behind me, never talk about it until the next day. And then it would start over again. That coping strategy kind of followed me throughout my life and ended up causing some problems because I got really, really good at pretending none of the bad stuff was happening. And when I got older, you know, you've already mentioned that word trauma. I started seeing a counselor and she was like, "Kathy, that's trauma." And I was like, "No, it's not. No, trauma is when you've been to war or been abused or seen a violent crime. That's not trauma." She's like, "Kathy, that's trauma. It affected every area of your life. Yes, that's trauma." So once I figured that out, then I had a place to start to get some healing. But I became an adult that I'm 49 now, that 2 years ago, I was depressed and anxious to the point of almost suicidal.
My, yikes.
You know, thoughts running through my head. Everyone would be better without me. If I just turn the wheel, I can run into this tree or run off that bridge. I didn't act on them, but those thoughts were there. And just my general belief about myself being, people tolerate me, but they don't want me around. I'm gross. The smell has gotten 100 times better. Most days it's not there. I take medication that helps with my skin now. I don't look as bad as I did, but it's still there.
Yeah. So how did you get past, what did you do? I mean, you know, dealing with those types of thoughts, how did you get past that?
Well, I didn't tell anybody for a long time, but it really bothered me, and it should bother you if you are having those kind of thoughts. You know, you're driving home from work, and if I just turn the wheel, I could end it all. It should bother you, and it did. And I started talking to my husband about it. And we started with going to the doctor and talking to my physician about medication. A lot of people feel like that's a cop-out. Don't want medication. I do not. I take medication for diabetes and for my thyroid. Depression is no different in my eyes. So I had to start with medication. Started with one medication, ended up having to add a second one to kind of get those neurotransmitters going. Once those kicked in, because when you're in a severe depression, you feel like you are stuck in quicksand. Getting out of bed, going to work, and I did continue to go to work. I didn't do the best job that I could do. I was better when I was with the kids at my school. When I was teaching them, when I was with them, those thoughts tended to stay away. But as soon as I got alone, they came back pretty severely. But I started with medication, and then I went to counseling. And That's where I learned about trauma, and God began to really start working in my life at that point. She is a Christian counselor,
Mm-hmm.
and so she brought God and Jesus into every single session, and that's when things really started to turn around for me.
That's good. Yeah, and it's interesting that you said that when you were helping or working with the kids, that's when the thoughts were put aside for a while. And because I know that in reading and even experiencing things like that myself, that when we are focused on helping others, when we're of service to other people, then our stuff doesn't seem nearly so bad because we're focused on somebody else's needs. So thank heavens that you actually had that in your life. And that probably helped you in addition to getting the counseling, which I'm so glad you did, because that's also so important for anyone listening and watching. I'm just going to say right now, if you find yourself having suicidal thoughts, to reach out. There are hotlines available. Reach out. Don't try to manage this on your own. Get help. So I'm glad you did. But is going through, and we'll get back to God too, because I think the God part of that is an important part as well. Actually, let's start there. Let me start there, and then I'll pick up on it. What do you think maybe was significant about maybe in particular, working with like a Christian counselor, and how did your spirituality and that help you in particular? Do you think?
Oh goodness, I know. I can give you a few examples, but as I'm talking with her about my childhood, and I've told you about one incident, there's many, even on into high school, even with teachers, even on into adulthood. I have had other people who I thought were my friends and coworkers be very cruel and say really hurtful things. Again, talking to her about how I just felt tolerated, not wanted. And anyway, she would say to me, "But what does God say about you?" I don't know. She's like, "Well, let's find out."
Okay.
So that's an example, and she still brings that up to me. I felt unforgivable for some mistakes that I made, and she would, what does God say? Do you believe? And this is a point that I kind of talk about in the book a lot. Do you believe that what God says is true? Is he lying?
Right.
No.
Yeah.
Then if he's telling the truth and you believe him, then you have to make a choice, and it is a choice.
Exactly.
To act like it is true, to think like it is true, but not an easy choice. It's not going to come just like that.
Right.
But another example, that first day of first grade, where the little boy was pitching a fit, we did something called trauma processing with that incident, because that's my earliest memory of really feeling like my presence makes other people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And one of the things that she asked me to do was to first imagine 48-year-old Kathy walking into that classroom. What would 48-year-old Kathy say to me at 6?
Right.
And then she had me do it with Jesus. Jesus walks into that classroom, Kathy. What does he do? What does he say? And I didn't even have to tell her. I just had to think that through in my head.
Sure.
And, Jesus was there. He knew it. He saw my suffering and he felt for me, but he couldn't rescue me from it. Why am I the one? My skin disease is 2 in a million. 2 in a million. Why me? I don't know. I don't know. But maybe this is why. You never know. Just don't know. But, so my counselor, I firmly believe in Christian counselors, because I don't think healing can take place without God. And she consistently brought me back to where my eyes were looking in the right direction.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I definitely, I love how she said, well, what would God say? And talking about, is it true? Because I believe we're created in God's image. So, and also, God doesn't make mistakes. So you're not a mistake. You were created for a reason. And perhaps the reason is for you to have gone through all of this so that you could share your story and maybe help others who are going through something similar, or maybe the other one in a million. You're one of two. That other person out there who is going through this and needs some support. It's for that. So, which brings me to my next question, which is what prompted you to decide finally to actually share your story? Because like you mentioned already that your mother was surprised, I think that you were going to do that. So what prompted you, and how did you find the courage?
Well, it was not my idea. Let me just say that. It was not my idea. I was in this very room cleaning house on Saturday in November of last year, and I heard almost out loud, write a book. I was like, that's hilarious. I don't know how to write a book. I don't know what you're talking about. Nobody wants to hear what I have to say. What? I blew it off. Okay. So the next week, same room, same thing. Kathy, you have a story that I am going to use to my glory and to bring people closer to me. Tell your story. And I was like, okay, I'll tell it. He said, no, write it. So I went to my husband and I told him what I was like, honey, you're not going to believe this. And honestly, that's exactly the way it happened. And 6 months later, it's on Amazon and Kindle. And I don't even know. I don't even know how I got here. But now I just want it to get in the hands of the people that need it, that need to hear my message. And part of my message in this book is God can't fix it for you. You have to help yourself. And, for example, what does God say about you? Well, it's not going to jump out of the Bible into your head, right? It doesn't work that way. You can't sleep on it and it ooze into your head. I'm being funny. I have a little bit of a jokester in me. Sorry.
No, that's good.
But so I had to be very intentional about finding out what God says about me. It would be easy to do nothing. I wasn't in church. I hadn't been in church in 30 years. And I had to get up and get to church, which sounds very simple. Go to church. It's not that simple. When you've been away for that long, when you have that much shame and condemnation, and Satan was, he was on me pretty hardcore, but I had to get back in church and I had to get in a small group Bible study. I'm the kind of person, when I look at the Bible, I don't even know where to start. I mean, what? So I needed to get involved in a small group that had a guided Bible study, that made me look up scriptures and answer questions about it. And I had to be super, super intentional. I had to memorize not a ton of scriptures, two, and put them all over my house. Literally, I can't see one now. And I would read them. Kathy, God has not given you a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and of sound mind, or self-discipline. And it does take self-discipline. It takes recognizing when those thoughts, do you think those thoughts have gone away? No, they're still there. The enemy still wants me to believe that I don't deserve to be here, that I'm, unlovable and unwanted. And I have to be very self-disciplined to, my counselor would tell me, it's just a thought. Right. It can't hurt you, and you don't have to pay attention to it, and you don't have to keep thinking it. And I thought, she's crazy. There's no way I can control my thoughts. Well, guess what? I learned to do just that. I did. Satan likes to attack me when I'm mowing grass, because that's my Jesus time. I listen to praise music and mowing circles and, anyway. And I can feel he wants to intervene in that. He wants to try to stop me from having that time with God. And so it takes a lot of self-discipline, and I don't do it perfectly every time, but I can feel those thoughts coming in, and it's like, no, no, go. I'm a child of the King. Okay. You don't have any authority here. Leave me alone. I talk with my hands. I'm sorry.
No, that's perfectly fine. I do too, but I've learned to keep them on my lap most of the time, or at least while I'm interviewing. When I'm doing my own podcast, when it's just me talking, yeah, I probably get more animated.
Sorry.
But I love that because I have like a little card on my desk that says, something similar, like it's only a thought, and a thought can be changed.
Yes.
And that's it. You can choose, because that is the other thing, is that God gave us free will to make choices, and I know you've talked about that already a little bit, because you can decide and say, yeah, just, thank you for sharing. I sometimes will do that. It's like when those thoughts come in my head, I'll be like, yeah, thank you for sharing. Okay. And now I'm going to choose to think something differently, because I don't like that thought.
Right, exactly. Now my mother, she doesn't like it when I do this, but she says to me growing up, you should never say shut up, right? You should say hush, be quiet, stop talking. You never say shut up. Okay. Listen, I think if there's anybody that deserves to hear shut up, it's Satan. So every now and then I have to say, Satan, shut up, go away. She hates it when I say that, but I've yelled it on the lawnmower before. I've whispered it in my house in the middle of an argument with my husband, which doesn't happen often, but we have to stand up for ourselves, and we have that power.
Yes.
To exercise our identity in Christ, and it does take, there's that verse again, power and love and self-discipline. And we have to love ourselves as much as he loves us.
Right.
And we have to love him in the way that, one of the mistakes I made is I put my husband on the throne. Big time, because imagine being me thinking, is anybody ever going to love me? I am unlovable. I am gross. No one's ever going to love me. So when I found this amazing man 20 years ago, I latched onto him, and we latched onto each other, and I really made him my everything. And I had to learn to put God on the throne first.
Yeah. And I think it's also about putting you first too, because you are part of God and God is a part of you. So that's good that you learned to do that. I was going to ask you, because you mentioned that you have like a Bible verse so in your house. So what is the one that you were looking at? What does it say? I'm curious.
That one I just said, that God has not given us a spirit of fear.
Oh, okay. All right. Cool.
Yes. Yeah. And there's another one that says, do not be afraid. I am your God. I will help you and comfort you. Something like that. It's in another room. But sometimes I literally just had to walk up to those hanging on the wall and say them over and over and over and over. Even recorded myself.
Oh, sure. That's smart. Yeah, absolutely. That's very good. And I just realized that I don't think we ever said what the name of your book is. So can you share that?
It is called, it is called Tolerated, Not Wanted. If you think about my story, that makes sense. Tolerated, Not Wanted. And the subtitle is Finding God in the Aftermath of Childhood Trauma. That's what it looks like.
Oh, really good.
If you see it online. It's probably backwards. I don't know. Is it backwards?
Nope.
It's not. Okay, good. But it's got a picture of me as a little girl in a snow globe. And the reason, the snow globe, I told you my skin peels all the time.
Yeah.
We call that snow at my house because I can wave my arm. I can walk across the floor and there's skin everywhere. So I live in a snow globe. That's what I tell people. Everywhere I go, skin falls out of my clothes, out of my hair, everywhere. So I'm in a snow globe. Nobody else I know is in a snow globe for sure.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. So, good imagery. In going through your journey now, and I noticed that Well, what tips would you have for someone who is, for whatever reason is finding themselves, I know we mentioned about the suicide, but maybe it's not quite that severe.
Right.
Maybe they're just dealing with depression and anxiety, especially in light of this year. We've been dealing with this crazy pandemic, and which I think has made a lot of people much more anxious than they normally would have been otherwise. So what do you recommend for people?
Get help. Don't be afraid to talk about it, to let people around you know what you're struggling with, and don't be afraid to make that phone call to your doctor or to a counselor. Don't be afraid to do that. Those were huge steps for me, but they were life-saving steps for me. It's okay to not be okay.
Yes.
But it's not okay to choose to stay there and not get help when you need it. And I would also say that you need to, in my opinion, be very intentional about learning what our Heavenly Father says about us, because there's a lot of promises in that Bible that can calm anxiety. And I had to be very intentional about seeking those out.
That's good. Yeah, I've got a plaque up on my wall over here that says, "With God, all things are possible." And I truly do believe that. And it's just a matter of acknowledging that and knowing that. I think also in knowing that God has our best interest at heart. God doesn't want us to suffer. And so if you're finding that you are in pain, then like you said, reach out, get help. And maybe it's even if you do belong to a church, even call I've actually done that before. I've reached out to my minister before when I was having some issues, and it's a start. So don't be afraid to do that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. What do you, okay, so you're still a teacher, or what is your?
I'm a school counselor.
School counselor. Okay. All right.
For the little kids, which I love.
Ones? Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's very rewarding, I imagine. But how are you managing now, even again because kids have been home from school and stuff? So how is that? Are you able to even still counsel kids right now?
It's hard. I think the ones that when we went off for the pandemic, I think the ones that really needed me were not able to get to me, which is really sad. The kids that I could talk to were kids whose parents were very involved, and the ones that needed me possibly were the things they needed to talk about were sitting right next to them, trapped at home with domestic violence increasing and child abuse and all that. But listen, I'm a hugger. Maybe that goes back to me not being touched so much as a child and people being grossed out by me. Yeah. But I get more hugs by 8:00 than most people get in a day at work. And I miss that. Yeah. I don't know how on earth I'm going to go back and see these beautiful, happy faces and not hug them. I don't know how I'm going to do that. I don't have to pray about that.
You'll figure out a way. Even if you have to do the elbow thing, that's what, at least get some sort of touch a little bit.
How do you comfort a child who is crying because they miss their mom without hugging them? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, let's hope that some way we will figure out a way out of this and it will work out better. Any last bit of advice or any other information that we haven't talked about, maybe that you think would be helpful?
Well, I do want people to know that if they go to toleratednotwanted.com, there is a free workbook that they can download that goes along with the book that I created, that's got Bible verses and things that you can walk through yourself. Okay. So that's out there. And then the book is on Amazon and Kindle, of course. So.
All right. Excellent. Well, I will be sure to have that all that information will be in the show notes. So if you go to liveloveengagepodcast.com and search for this episode, search for Kathy Smith, Kathy Carter, and Tolerated, you'll find it. So you'll be able to get the information. So yes, I encourage everyone, go ahead and pick up a copy of the book, order it, and definitely take advantage of that free workbook. That's very generous. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your story. And hopefully you have inspired someone out there to be kind to themselves and to realize that they can get help. So I hope that's my intention.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, dear lovely listeners and or viewers on YouTube. I appreciate you as well. And until next time, as always, I encourage you to go out there and live fully, love deeply, and engage authentically.